Hello. Today we're going to talk about the chemistry of living things. And this is in correspondence with concept 1.1 atoms, elements, and compounds and chemical bonds. As we kind of look at the little itty bitty pieces that make up all living things, we're really talking about atoms. Atoms make up everything. And it's interesting to think about how much we can divide a living thing down into these itty bitty little pieces that we clearly cannot see with our eyes. When we think about different atoms, this is the smallest basic unit of matter. It builds matter as we know it, and matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. And when we're looking at elements and we're talking about elements, this is just one type of atom. So you may have heard of the element hydrogen or the element oxygen. These elements, I'm just going to jump ahead here, but they are found on the periodic table, which hopefully you're familiar with at least a little bit. Hydrogen, H over here, oxygen, O over here. Jumping back, in terms of how atoms are structured, the very basic structure of an atom includes a nucleus in the middle here that contains protons and neutrons. And then in these kind of rings we call energy levels, we have electrons. In this image here, the electrons are represented by the kind of yellow circles here. When we look at an atom and how it interacts with other atoms, this process, these interactions that we're looking at are called bonds. Bonds are little connections between atoms, and bonding involves the outermost electrons in these energy levels. So here we call those electrons, they have a special name, they are called valence electrons. So looking at our periodic table here, just some things I want to point out to you. The elements that are really important in biology, these are what we call nonmetals. Not saying that metals aren't involved in biology, but there's lots of these chemical interactions in living things that involve nonmetals. Hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, so on and so forth. We're going to talk a lot about carbon later on. When we talk about how these atoms interact, we're talking about atoms forming and bonding together to form a compound. Here in this slide, we see the compound water. We know it is a compound because it has different elements bound together. So it has hydrogen and oxygen, and they're connected, they're bound together. Water has a really unique shape, which we're going to talk about later on as well. And in that shape, there's some really, really cool properties of water. Another example is carbon dioxide. Here we have carbon in the middle and oxygen, two oxygens specifically. bound to that carbon. So there is one carbon atom and two oxygen atoms in the compound carbon dioxide. In terms of how living things are made, they're really a combination of different compounds. Compounds can be really complex or pretty simple. And that really has to do with the types of bonds. So the first type of bond we're going to talk about is an ionic bond. And ionic bonds involve these things called ions. Ions have either gained or lost an electron. If the particular ion has lost an electron, it is a positively charged ion. If it gains an electron, it is negatively charged. Think of it as it is getting more negative because it's gaining an electron. With that, positive ions are called cations. Negative ions are called anions. And it is those opposite charges where ionic bonds form. Essentially, one atom donates or gives an electron, and the other atom accepts that electron, forming a bond. When we talk about ionic bonds, this is really important. So if you're identifying if two elements are bonded ionically or covalently, there's a little way to kind of cheat, if you will. When you have an ionic bond, you have elements from over here. These are metals, any elements over in this region. Really any elements on this side of this little staircase here. So these are all the metals. The elements on this side over here, these elements are nonmetals, including hydrogen. So when you have a metal and a nonmetal bound together, it's an ionic compound. So if you're trying to figure it out, like sort it, look at one of the elements, see if it's located on this side or that side, and then look at the other element. Another indicator would be if there's only two elements in that particular compound. Covalent bonds occur when there's a sharing of electrons. Another name for a covalent compound is a molecule. That's a little tricky, I know. So covalent bonds only involve nonmetals. So that means, going back to our periodic table, only these elements over here can be covalently bound. That also includes hydrogen. And our periodic table, nonmetals, metals, nonmetals bound to other nonmetals. These would be covalent bonds and covalent compounds. And covalent compounds are also known as molecules. Now, covalent compounds can also have more than two elements bound together. Just a little breakdown of what I was saying about molecules. Molecules are compounds, or a molecule is a compound. Molecules only have covalent bonds. Not all compounds are molecules, but all molecules are compounds. I know that's a little tricky, but that's kind of our foundation here for the chemistry of life in terms of what is an atom, how do atoms bind to other atoms, what are the two main types of bonds that we talk about, in biology, there's some ancillary bonds that we're going to learn about that are specific and really important with water. And we'll check that out in concept 1.2. But I hope this was helpful, and thank you